Thank you, Michael. This is going to be a polemic, so if I appear to get heated, don't take it personally, but I will be singling a few of you out. Right. Thank you for coming along. I pity you. What are you, able-bodied? That doesn't mean you can think straight. Poor, poor wretches. There, but for the God of grace go all of us. I pity you. No, I don't. I'm just saying that if I really pitied you, people living in the first world with jobs you can take half an hour or an hour off from just to have your lunches, with the luxury to be diverted from your humdrum lives, the neighbour's barking dog that keeps you awake at night, but at least you drag yourself out of the cot early enough in the morning to have a breakfast consisting of Wheat Bix or Vitabrits or Frosty Loops or Cocoa Bubbles, 2 toast and Vegemite and a cup of weak tea, 1 milk, 2 sugar, 3 minutes out the door, off to the daily slog where you work 2.5 flexi days a week, 5 if you're very lucky, for a weekly pay packet that would last Chinese factory labour producing an apple a day, 6 months' salary without annual leave, and then, unlike the drudge who made the laptop you sit at in the evening, night after night while the spouse gets the kids off to the bed or the bath, you have this half hour or hour off that I mentioned a while back now at the beginning of the sentence. Don't pretend you can't remember that part. And you, with your limitless choices in this span of so-called free time, choose to come waltzing in here, all eager to hear what the crippled guy at the microphone has to say. And the first thing he has to say is, what? I pity you. What are you, able-bodied? That doesn't mean you can think straight. If I really pitied you, you'd know it sure enough. I'd come up to you and say, what happened to you? Your nose isn't on straight. Your teeth are crooked. That's a terribly hooked, and if you don't mind my saying, sir, fairly ugly schnozzle you've got there, and your molars are as yellow as ice after huskies have pissed on it. Did the surgery go wrong? Oh, you were born like that. Huh. Poor, poor boy, girl, woman, deformed human being. Still, it must have been God's will. There's always someone worse off than you. Look, there she goes. No, if I truly pitied you, I wouldn't have said any of that. I wouldn't have this consuming rage to puncture your illusions that not only are you able-bodied, what does that mean? Can you climb Everest in your sleep? Or perhaps you're some sort of mind reader who knows that when I'm pushing myself up a slight incline and not speeding along faster than you stroll, I must be struggling? One day, back in the mid-90s, I was tooling through Camden Market in North London one Sunday afternoon, minding my own business, which as it was a Sunday afternoon wasn't really so much business as the pleasure of leisure. Stopped for a red light, I was waiting for it to turn green. Suddenly an almighty shove from behind launched me into the middle of the road, forcing the driver of a car to slam on the brakes to avoid smashing into me. And although it's irrational of me to have felt any fear of that, I mean, after all, what's fear for me? What's the worst thing that can happen? I'm going to end up in a wheelchair? I felt so outraged by the violation of my personal space that I rounded on with the poor young drunken Scotsman who'd propelled me into the traffic. I was only trying to help you, he bellowed. Well, I was doing well enough without your help, you idiot, I replied peacefully. And as he tried to melt into the crowd, I called after him for good measure, ask next time before you help, do I push you around? If I pitied you, I wouldn't puncture your illusions. If you didn't pity me, you'd try to puncture my tyres, I know you, except you wouldn't succeed at that. These are tubeless. But no, hell no, I don't pity you. Am I your carer? But just say I did pity you. It would open your eyes to learn what a horrible disadvantage you're living at, not being in a wheelchair. It's well known that if you have wheels, you'll travel. I've been to nearly half the world's countries in this chair or one of its predecessors. In Paris, where the transport systems aren't the friendliest for low rollers like me, I spent hours every night while I was there in 2007 and again in 2009, pushing myself from the centre of town out to the 20th arrondissement where I was staying. I know Paris like the back of my hand because the front of my hands has pushed 2 wheels over half its length. I know London in a way that tube-travelling troglodytes never will, not to mention black cab habitués. If I don't know my way around Vienna nearly as well, it's because that city has Europe's only integrated and totally accessible transport network. There's not a single tram, bus or train wheelies can't use. But when it comes to getting your way around a city under your own steam, I snort in derision at you bipeds. The merely upright citizen, if that's what you are, is left in my slipstream every time. Yes, I know the sort of smug thought bubbles that populate other people's brains. I can see what you're thinking with my two good eyes. Oh, look at the man with the mobility problem. Huh, mobility problem? What mobility problem? I'll have you know, wheelers are more mobile than walkers. On the flat, we can outpace you if we turn our hands to it. Downhill, we whiz past you, and if we see each other at Chadstone or Southland, you'd better get out of our way. I'm not saying we're unkind. When I see a frightened 3-year-old in my path clutch her mother's skirts in terror, I take care to remind Mum that I never run people over deliberately. And anyway, one of the joys, I like to think of it as a compensation for those of us now denied the fun activities of horseback riding or cross-country skiing, is that we can canter, dodge and slalom between pedestrians, while sharing one of the only advantages we have in common with skateboarders. We terrorise the elderly. You may cherish the delusion that you are masters of the universe, or at least the Melbourne CBD. But the truth is that whether we glide along in aluminium or titanium state, or cruise around in red-chromed tanks that respond to our every whim at the press of a button, yes, the power is in our hands. Today, Little Lonsdale Street. Tomorrow, the world. I'm not particularly disabled. In fact, I'd like to let you into a little secret just between us. I'm actually an explorer. I seriously considered whether I should wear a safari suit and a solar toupee for this occasion. If I had, it would have given you one more reason to take the pith out of me. I'm no Captain Cook or Columbus, let alone our very own Lassiter. Anyway, they all came to bad ends, respectively speared, unrecognised and lost without trace. Far be it from me in this house of scribes to try defining an entire genre, but I'm happy to regard an explorer as someone possessed by the demon of curiosity and at the same time possessed of a love of history, geography or culture. Why, I dare say there are dozens of explorers right here in this space, a couple of dozen at least. For all I know, you're space explorers. To discover new geographical facts may be beyond us here on the Google Map surface of the Earth. Though I once met a distracted husband poring over Google Earth 1,000 kilometres from home, and when I asked what he was looking at, he said, "My house. I'm convinced my wife has been seeing another man and I'm looking at the driveway to see if his car's parked outside." When I travel, I explore the world out there from a metre above the surface. I study the looks on the faces of the people, what they write, what they say, who they are. Long after the contours of every land have been mapped to within millimetres, we are still searching for the chart that can explain standard deviations from the behavioural norm and what's over the next ridge of experience. I once met a surly bartender in the Dutch city of Maastricht who told me, "I'm an arsehole, a bastard, an evil person, and so are you. But you know the difference between us? I know who I am, and I can handle it." It's just like that with disability. We're all disabled, you, and you, and you, and you, and I can handle it. In a minute or two, I'm going to prove that. But you know the difference between us? I know I am, and I can handle it. It is we who know ourselves for what we are, the disabled, who will inherit the earth, for we have reinvented the wheel. A superior race is being formed by evolution's surreptitious master plan. Wouldn't you be surprised to know that while the aficionados of athletics competitions wonder if in their lifetimes or their grandchildren's the men's marathon will ever be run in lower than 2 hours? That's a slow, slow day for wheelchair speed demons. The world record for completing a marathon in a drag race that makes the chair I'm seated in look like an old East German Trabant on its last wheels is 1 hour, 20 minutes. Do you want to race? I'd beat your hands down. Anyhow, this walking caper is overrated. Believe me, I've seen it done. Used to do it myself. On a hot summer's day, I never burn the soles of my feet. I don't trip over my own shoelaces anywhere near as often as I used to. If I want to get drunk, I have a great advantage over you, sir. You have to work all night at it. I'm paralytic before I begin. Know why my friends won't let me bat when we play cricket? If they get me out, I refuse to walk. I could tell you more jokes, but I don't do stand-up. Some years ago, a spinal specialist at the Austin Hospital told me that paraplegics and quadriplegics are positively privileged compared with the general population in one more very unexpected way. When we take a long-haul flight, our chances of dying from deep vein thrombosis are sharply reduced because our bodies are accustomed to slow blood circulation, and sitting for hours on end is nothing unusual for us. It's what we do. I must say that before this pleasant surprise, the disturbing thought of a blood clot travelling to my heart while I was just aiming to get to the heart of Europe had spoilt my enjoyment on more than one flight when a smarmy member of the crew would advise passengers to get out of their seats and walk around the cabin. Now, I sit through these announcements, staring at the intercontinental map on the little pocket-sized TV on the seat back in front of me, with a superior look on my face, as I tell myself, let the others worry about DVT. I'm going to watch a DVD. Some people resent the cushy lives we wheelers live. I think, deep down, they envy the fact that we've had a writers' centre named after us. I can't think of a reason other than naked envy, insane jealousy, to explain why they think asylum seekers are living in lotus land. The indigenous inhabitants of this land are somehow advantaged. Oh yeah, what an advantage it is to drop out of school early, live under the threat of constant violence in a fourth world camp on their own lands, stolen from under their bare feet, clinging on for dear life to 60,000 years of culture, with only the bleakest prospects of saving more than the remnants of it into old age, which can begin at 45 and end at 55. 20 years before you fellow Australians in your lazy boy recliners finally curl up your toes. And why people rolling around in chairs somehow have Centrelink at their beck and call, while honest, hard-working, upright folk must scrabble a living from the unforgiving earth. Envy, pure envy. But even if the proverbial playing field were on the horizontal spirit level, why do some people get a buzz from making our lives harder than they already are? Or, to be charitable, which as the quick-witted among you will have realised I'm not always inclined to be, why don't some people get it? A couple of years ago, I was travelling in Britain and about to head across the waves to Northern Ireland. After years of experience travelling the world in a wheelchair, you get to know what questions to ask. There was I at the front counter of a youth hostel in Manchester, getting the receptionist to place a call through to another youth hostel, this one in Belfast, where I hoped to stay a fortnight from that time. Nothing like booking ahead to guarantee a bed, right? Well, the receptionist, prepped by me, said to her colleague across the sea, "The client is in a wheelchair, and on August the 20th he'll be arriving by boat from Liverpool, docking at about 6:30 p.m. and possibly not reaching your hostel until 7:30 p.m. She paused and nodded. He'd just like to ask if you could place a reserved sign on one of the lower bunks in the room. He's been allocated because he can't walk. Suddenly, the receptionist's countenance darkened. Her eyebrows knit tight. What do you mean you can't? She seemed to be going into shock. Then she cupped her hands over the receiver and whispered to me, "They say they can book you in, but they can't guarantee you a lower bunk. You may have to occupy a top bunk." Controlling my initial reflex reaction, I took thought to soften my response. From previous shocks to the system, I knew how to handle this one. I was sweetness, I was light. "Tell them I'll take it," I told her, "and tell them I'll confirm the booking 2 days before my arrival, by phone." The receptionist couldn't believe I was saying yes to such a lousy offer. What was my game? You could almost hear her thinking. 2 days before my ship sailed from Liverpool, I rang the Belfast hostel again, gave my name, confirmed my booking. Then I raised the delicate question all over again. I just wanted to check, is it right that you won't put a reserved sign on the lower bunk so that an arriving guest who can't walk won't have to wake other people up and ask them to change beds? That's right, said the voice at the other end. We don't use that system, and we can't give you any guarantee you'll get a lower bunk. The manager's very firm on that. Right there and then, I reconfirmed my booking and said softly, I know you can't guarantee anything. But when I get there, tired off the boat, and lug my sports bag through the front door on Friday night, I can guarantee you I will be staying in a lower bunk because that's all I can physically do. And I've booked this hostel bed in good faith. I would advise someone there to think about it. You may not be able to guarantee anything, but I can guarantee there'll be a big headache none of us will want if common sense isn't exercised at some point. Now, this was high-risk poker. My ears were peeled back in expectation of a banging noise being the person at the other end hanging up in my ear and cancelling my booking, and not necessarily in that order. Instead, my quiet insistence seemed to work a treat. The receptionist, keeping his voice remarkably steady, simply said, "We'll see you on the 20th, Mr. Haley." And so they did. It was indeed almost 7:30 when I dragged my weary bones through their door. A receptionist looked distracted for a wee moment before breaking into a smile of obvious recognition. That's another advantage of being in a chair, I almost forgot. People tend to know you who've never met you. At whatever velocity you manage to go, your reputation precedes you. "Ah, Mr. Haley, we were expecting you," boomed the voice in a show of welcome even Basil Fawlty at his most fawning would have been hard put to emulate. I also lack his height. "We are glad to see you. How was your boat trip? Not rough, I hope?" "No, not too rough, thanks," I replied. "Please sign this form," the receptionist said, pushing a registration card in front of me. And, as he handed me the door key, he added in measured tones, "You've got the bottom bunk in room 7. There's a reserved sign on the bed." It's not out of some malice or schadenfreude that I would like everyone to be in a wheelchair. Although I have to let you into a secret, another secret. This is not some idle rhetorical wish. I actually am working on a plan to make sure that everyone in the world is in a chair by 2018. I can't go into details here for obvious reasons. There could be an ASIO agent among you, and my chief element is surprise. Surprise and a fanatical devotion to the Pope. But when you've seen how, after the initial difficulty of adapting yourself, very much the same sort of challenge encountered by anyone who hops onto a motorbike or into a rowboat for the first time, only to find long familiar rules of locomotion have been changed while you weren't looking, after that initial difficulty you find yourself more or less at ease, as what you have to do to push yourself around becomes second and then first nature. The thought may just occur to you, as it did to me, disabled is not so much a description as a calculated insult, a vast exaggeration, a distortion of everyday reality. How am I disabled? Come on, can one of you tell me that? Right, I would have thought it was obvious. I can't walk. Can I play piano? As it happens, I can. Can I work for a living? As it happens, I do. Can I fly a small plane? I could, but I've never put in the effort required to achieve that. Am I disabled? Only to the extent I can't walk. I'm partially disabled, overwhelmingly capable. So are you all. Can you, madam, perform acrobatics on a trapeze? I didn't think so. Oh, I pity you. You, sir, I may be wrong, but you look to me as though you're disabled when it comes to reciting the value of pi to 100,000 places. Would I be right? Don't bother to prove it, we don't have that much time. And you, Bruce, can you run 100 metres in under 10 seconds? Come on, I'm not going to race you. No, I didn't think you could. From this random, almost random, survey, I'm tempted to conclude... Oh, my gosh. My gosh, look how the time has run away. I must conclude that the average lunchtime city worker and shopper is a pathetically disabled specimen of humanity. You're all incapacitated in one respect or another, as am I. But hey, who isn't? Okay, how about this? I've got arms that can open doors. When I go slow, it's because I prefer to. I've got a voice. If I want help, I'll ask for it. And then, to cap it all, I'll stop pitying you if you stop pitying me. Deal?